Two main stories in the week ahead. First, with the record heat that will impact much of the southern, central, and northern plains over the next several days, along with the jet stream becoming very active, especially as we start the day on Wednesday, really getting amplified heading into Thursday. We'll be seeing multiple days of severe weather will likely unfold as we get further and deeper into the week. But first and foremost, let's talk about the record heat that likely is just going to get started today across much of the southern plains. This is your 850 millibar heat anomalies, and it is soaring temperatures, folks. We're talking record-breaking temperatures for the month of May, and these are almost unheard of. It's getting so early, started this early, so early in the season with not just record-breaking temperatures, but even some hundreds going into Texas and much of the central and even into the northern plains. Parts of North Dakota could actually hit 100 degrees today. Let's look at some of these record temperatures will likely unfold later on this afternoon as we push in that southwest wind, and that's going to crank and soar the temperatures well above 100. There's like 107. All these areas and are circled are seeing a record temperature across a good part of Texas, but it's not just the south, folks. It's much of the central and even the northern plains. Look at that. That's Dakota's back into the 90s, and some of these isolated areas could in fact hit 100 degrees later on this afternoon as the temperatures will likely soar. And that's not even the hottest time. Well, that will get into tomorrow. So here's the jet stream as things get going tomorrow. So we'll still be dealing with the record heat. In fact, even more intense as we'll be watching this trough starting to eject off out into the desert southwest and being amplified as it moves across, tapping into some of those higher heat anomalies. And the jet stream will start to become active as we head into the heat of the afternoon, originating back into the Dakotas. And we do, in fact, have that slight risk for severe storms as things start to bubble up in that area back into the Bismarck. I mean, they've been well into the 90s, well above average for this time of year. So it's got a lot of fuel to fuel these storms as we head into the afternoon back towards Grand Forks, further south into Aberdeen, as well as into the Sioux Falls region, getting into Nebraska. And that thing could actually go enhanced as we get further into tomorrow, especially their areas into Nebraska. But the heat is going to be the real deal, folks. I mean, this is not a misprint. I mean, numerous records, not just daily records, will unfold, even some all-time May records. I mean, I think the May record in San Antonio is 104. I think we easily surpass that. Austin's pushing triple digits. Even Dallas is pushing into the triple digit heat. That is likely the earliest since 1998. We have to go back a long ways, folks, for something like this. The last time it actually happened, well, in the 90s in Oklahoma, back into Kansas, and there's the 90s surging across the middle part of the country. So that will be the main event over the next couple of days. And then once we go into Thursday, yes, it starts to become a lot more active, especially further north into the upper Midwest. Again, we'll be tapping into another area of disturbed weather. Just pretty significant disturbance is going to be dropping out of the Dakotas, and that jet stream becomes negatively tilted and produces numerous showers and thunderstorms that will likely bring all three modes of severe weather as we head into that Thursday time frame. There'll be a northern branch as well as in a southern branch that likely gets amplified heading into after that 4 o'clock afternoon time frame, and also a lot of Cape values, a lot of energy to fuel this atmosphere. So we've had a little bit of a lull in the severe storms over the last week, but that's going to come back with a vengeance as it normally does in the month of May. And we're getting into that peak season, folks. I mean, this is the middle of May. This is typically what you would see this time of year. So this is definitely not unheard of. The record heat is the one that's not really normal for this early on in the season, but the severe weather is, and unfortunately we'll be dealing with a widespread event as we head into that Thursday time frame across much of areas of Wisconsin, back into Illinois, back through areas of Kentucky, Indiana. I think if anything, this shifts maybe even a little bit further east. So right now, the Storm Prediction Center doesn't highlight of a pretty good swath of severe storms back into Wisconsin, as well as into Michigan, getting for those areas into Chicago, as well as into Indianapolis, and getting into back into Ohio. If anything, like looking at some of the latest data, this will likely shift even a little bit further off to the east and be a little bit more amplified further south as we head into closer to the event on into Indiana. And I think it even gets more intense as we drop further south into Kentucky, back into Nashville, going into that Friday timeframe. But right now we're looking at the Supercell Composite Index as some of the short range guidances are just now coming into range, and it's been hinting at this more of a eastward southern shift in the overall initiation of these storms. And I think this will shift a little bit further east than where we are right now. So the bullseye may in fact be unloaded into areas of Indiana, portions of Ohio, but further south into Kentucky, as well as into Tennessee as we get closer to this event. But overall, here's the overall low pressure center. It starts to get wound up back into the low 900 millibar range as this cranks up into the heat of the afternoon. This is a snapshot around 4 o'clock of what maybe the radar depiction as we got supercell thunderstorms forming, and then we'll have the back building, the southern branch likely forming. All these will likely be a kind of a supercell nature as these push off to the east. And I think things get going as we get into the evening time frame there in Indiana, getting closer to the event. But then it doesn't end there. It goes into Friday. So as we look at the northern side of the branch, we'll also be looking at starting to appear on the southern branch of the jet stream as we have these little multiple disturbances that will be racing across west to east. So this will have to be looking out for the Tennessee Valley. And also as we head into closer into the weekend, more of the southern branches, this disturbance is the dry line starts to get active across the southern plains, especially there into Texas, as we'll be tapping into some of that fuel that's going to be unloaded into the atmosphere, the upper levels of the atmosphere over the next couple of days with that record heat. So here's the setup with the cool front that's going to be draped across this area back into Friday. I think that's when things really get going into Friday, as they'll be tapping into to a lot more moisture content back then. I think the humidity values will start to come up. The actual temperatures will start to come down, but the heat index will likely start to soar as it's tapping into some more moisture content. And that is what's going to fuel these storms as we get into that Friday night, going especially into the Saturday for the southern plains. But going into Friday, we'll have to be keeping a high alert for those areas into Kentucky, back into Tennessee. There's the overall setup as the atmosphere will start to try to bubble up. I think they'll be dealing with a little bit more of a stronger capping inversion further off to the west, but over here back into Missouri, back into southern Illinois, get into western Tennessee, as well as into Kentucky. I think things light up big time, and that's indicative to what's looking at the latest update from the SIPS guidance. This is your essentially your analog guidance, is what's happened during past events, and this is also the computer learning guidance as well, obviously a little bit more amplified. And then this is where Storm Prediction Center is right now on a day 4 risk. So do expect things to get elevated, getting a little bit more higher intensity going into the closer to this event on Friday, back especially into Kentucky as well as into Tennessee. It could be a very high impact day. But going into Saturday, I think we'll start to have to shift our further attention further south, as we'll be watching the vertical velocity lift become a little bit more amplified with these disturbances. We'll be watching the dry line. So I think Friday, the dry line starts to get that shape, but it'll start hitting that capping inversion. You'll have to have some sort of elevated lift, and that's when the disturbance comes in out west. I think that's when, combined with the dry line going into that Thursday afternoon, I think that's when things will start to get active down there further south into Texas, out in West Texas, and those will move eastbound into late afternoon into the evening time frame on Saturday. So things could get pretty bumpy down there into Texas, into the Dallas-Fort Worth area, as we'll be watching supercells likely form off the dry line and shift further east. And there's, you kind of see it, what the latest flash index kind of looks like as the latest European guidance, as the short range guidance as is not in range yet, but the longer range global guidance is starting to hint at a little bit more favorable area combined with the active jet stream. So we'll be having to watch these areas further south, but especially heading into that Sunday time frame as the trough gets a little bit more amplified and starts to turn further north. We'll have to be looking at Oklahoma as well, and then of course further south, further off to the east, still for those areas into Kentucky, back into Tennessee, getting into Mississippi by then, back into Georgia. So things will start to get a little bit more active as the heat will be the main story to begin the week, and then the storms will be the main story by the middle of the week, and especially heading into this weekend the further south you live. So guys, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video, definitely hit the subscribe button, and catch my next update where I protect you before and after the storm.